Welcome back to another Ret Paladin video. Verabin here. Today we are going to be looking at the first week of Mythic Plus. This is the first opportunity that we've had to do these dungeons on a upgraded basis. So we were able to do the Mythic Zeros, and now we're working on Mythic Plus, at least on lower keys this week. So I wanted to kind of walk through my experiences with those and kind of see what's working, what isn't working. And another thing I wanted to talk about today was because Mythic Pluses are open, there is some data available for class representation and things like that. So I wanted to kind of see how Ret Paladins were doing as far as being represented in different key levels and things like that. That might give us an idea about how well Ret Paladins are doing in Mythic Plus. So we're going to look at all of that cool stuff, and that data is going to come from Raider.io. And yeah, unfortunately, that app, or that add-on rather, is still going to be present in Shadowlands. So love it or hate it, it is here to stay. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do to kind of improve our score and kind of hopefully get invited to groups more easily and stuff like that. So we're going to talk about all of those things in this video. So let's take a look. Before we get started with the video, please be sure to hodge that like button and subscribe for more Ret Paladin content. We're going to be doing content 2 or 3 times a week in Shadowlands, so you don't want to miss a thing. Also, check out the description in the video for links to Patreon and different merchandises that are available. There's a lot of different ways you can support the channel, including Amazon affiliates. And the way that works is you click below, and even if you don't buy the items that are linked, anything that you buy in there, proceeds of that will go to supporting the channel. So if you're enjoying the content, please consider supporting it in one of those ways. All right, so as far as Mythic keys, I've only had the time to do a few lower keys, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of keys. And the one in the background that we're showing is obviously Plaguefall. And this one was not too bad. I felt like the performance that we saw in Mythic Zeros was kind of duplicated in Mythic, at least lower key Mythics. You're still going to have a lot of trash DPS to really show those that AoE damage that we're so good at. So I think that we're still going to definitely be strong in Mythic Plus from that perspective. There's obviously some differences when you get into Mythic Plus. You're going to start seeing affixes and things like that. So this week we had the affix where the trash mobs were a little bit stronger, so that kind of plays to our strengths a little bit. And then there's also the bursting affix, which isn't really one that we can do a whole lot about. Unfortunately, we can't dispel magic debuffs, so if we could, that would be pretty cool. But there are some things in here that I think where Ret Paladins can kind of bring something to the table. You can see where, in this boss, for example, we can cleanse the disease, so that's definitely something you can add to the team that can help a little bit. On +5, the boss fights aren't all that hard, so it's not really that big of a deal, but if you want to add a little bit to your team and make it a little bit easier, that's definitely something that you can do. All right, so as far as Raider.io scoring and a little bit of strategies there, at the beginning of the expansion now, most people don't have a very high score, but you can kind of boost your score up in a couple different ways. The easiest way to do this is to do kind of a lot of different lower keys. And so what that would look like is like you would rather do 5 Mythic 5s and of different types. So you'd want to do like all of the dungeons on Mythic 5 versus trying to push one key higher and higher. And that will kind of boost your score up a little bit. But obviously you want to also be doing as high keys as you can. But if you have the option of doing, like, say, a Mythic 7 Plaguefall, but you've already done a Mythic 6 Plaguefall, versus doing, like, a Mythic 6 Spires, and you haven't done any Mythic Plus Spires, then you'd rather do the Mythic 6 Spires. So hopefully that makes sense, because it'll give you more of a score. It'll give you a higher score boost, and your overall score will be a little bit higher. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to mention was how the Great Vault works with Mythic Plus rewards, because it wasn't obvious to me exactly how this was going to work, and I looked it up on Wowhead, and it's a little bit complicated, and it kind of makes sense when you break it down, but I think it's not necessarily intuitive. So basically how this works is that you have to do 10 Mythic Plus dungeons to get access to 3 different rewards in the Great Vault. So those tiers are at, when you complete 1 Mythic dungeon, you get access to 1 piece of gear to choose from, and then at 4 and 10, you get additional gear choices. So you're only going to get one of those pieces of gear, but you get a bigger array of choices. But what happens is that it's based on the highest key that you've done out of that number of Mythic plus dungeon. So what this means is that if you only do one dungeon and it's a Mythic plus 5, then you're going to get a Mythic plus 5 quality gear based on the gear table. So those levels are a little bit higher than the actual drops that are in a Mythic plus 5, but that's the tier that you'll get. Then if you complete 4 Mythic dungeons, you get access to another one, but that reward is not necessarily going to be a Mythic 5 reward. It's going to be based on the 4th highest key that you've done. So if you were to do 3 Mythic 5s and 1 Mythic 2, then the second reward that you get access to is only going to be a Mythic 2 reward. So this is kind of odd to me just because it almost seems like it discourages you from doing lower keys. So you wouldn't want to just do like your Mythic 14 for the week and then go do a bunch of Mythic 2s. Like you wouldn't want to do that at this point because you're only going to get access to 1 Mythic 14 level reward, right? So it's going to it almost seems like unless you're running, more than 10 keys, then the 11th, and after that, then you'd be able to then you'd have access to the full array of rewards. But I'm going to post some stuff on the screen that'll hopefully make this more clear. But I think it's kind of an odd system. It makes sense. It makes sense that if you did 1 Mythic 15, why would you get access to all of these different gears that are at that level? But at the same time, it does seem like it kind of discourages you from helping your friends out in lower keys. All right, so the next thing I wanted to look at was how are Ret Paladins doing on the whole as far as comparison to other melee DPS and other DPS in general. How many higher key Mythic Plus dungeons are actually taking Ret Paladins and things like that. So we are going to take a look at some statistics here. This is from Raider.io. This is where obviously they do the Raider.io scoring and all that stuff, but they also have all of that data here. So it's actually pretty cool. So let's take a look. So on this screen, you can see that for all dungeons, all affixes, and Mythic 10 and up of melee DPS, Ret Paladins are about 9% of those. So that's kind of middle of the pack. You can see Rogues and Death Knights are kind of top of the pack, and then Ret Paladins and Arms Warriors and Demon Hunters are kind of in the middle of the pack, and then there's a few of them that are a little bit lower, Windwalker Monks, Enhancement Shamans, and Ferals. So as far as comparison to other melee DPS, we're actually doing okay. I think the problem is that if you then go and check DPS, our percent goes way down. So we're having to now compete with Hunters who are doing incredibly well. We're having to compete with Fire Mages who are still doing really, really well, and then Balanced Druids as well. So not many of the melee are kind of up there with the range. So Sub-Rogues are obviously a little bit overtuned, I think, and they're kind of sticking up there. And Unholy Death Knights have really, really good AoE damage, so they're sticking up there as well. So overall, 10 and up, we're not doing all that great. If we go and look at just 10 to 14, though, that changes a little bit. If we comparison to melee DPS. So I think there's not actually a whole heck of a lot of data here, but we're still kind of hanging in there from 10 to 14. But the other thing that I noticed was that if you go and actually look in the tippity top of the leaderboard, even though we're saying 9.3%, if you go and look, it's kind of hard to find a Ret Paladin. And if you do find one, it's either 1 or 2 or 3 of like the same ones repeated. So even though there are a lot of them there, there's less than it seems because it's more of the same people being repeated over and over again. So there's like this guy, and then there is the other guy we saw before. So you have to go down to like top 100, and you're still seeing the same people in there. So it's really like the same Ret Paladins repeated over and over. All right, so to recap, as we're going up into higher keys, you can see that Ret Paladins are still going to be doing pretty good DPS because of how important Trash is. Having a really AoE focused build like the one that I've discussed in the last Mythic Dungeon video that I did, that is going to be really, really important to help you really keep up with the other DPS. You can see, at least in this example of Plaguefall plus 5, this is obviously a low key, but in this one, I was able to do top DPS. And part of that is just having to focus on having a really good build that can do that damage, and then having obviously you might have to make your own team or whatever, because it's still going to be a little bit challenging for DPS, especially melee DPS, to get into groups. You can see from the Raider.io scoreboards that melee DPS are still very much undesirable in Mythic Plus, and some of the fights kind of make that obvious. And when you're doing the fight, some of them are like, okay, great, so you got to run out, and when are you going to ever get back to the boss again? So there's definitely still a difficulty there. So I think when you're getting into these keys and you're making your own or things like that, you're going to want to make sure that you're performing. You're going to want to make sure you've got those consumables, you've got the the sharpening stones and the flasks and all that good stuff, so that you're really going to be able to push that key, and that your team won't think that you're holding back or anything like that. So that is kind of where it's at right now. I think that we are obviously still in a really good place going into Mythic Plus, and as we're seeing on the patch notes, it looks like Blizzard is still doing tuning at this point, so that is really good to see. I'm glad to see that Blizzard is definitely taking tuning seriously and class balance seriously and stuff like that. So that is going to be all for the video. If you have not done so already, please be sure to hash that like button and subscribe. Comment down below if you have anything else to add, and I will see you guys in the next video.